There is a club in Leipzig that German football spent years trying to pretend did not exist. There is a club in Salzburg whose original supporters walked away and formed a new club rather than accept what their team had become. There is a network connecting these clubs to others in New York, São Paulo, Saitama, and beyond. And at the head of it, as of last year, sits Jürgen Klopp. That sentence should not make sense. And yet, here we are. The Red Bull Football Network is the most controversial, most methodical, and most consistently successful multi-club project in the history of the sport. 6 clubs, 4 continents, a shared philosophy, music, that has developed some of the most valuable players in world football, and a level of cultural resistance from the game's music traditional institutions that has not slowed it down by a single step. This is the story of how it was built, why the game, music, hates it, and why that hatred might be football's biggest blind spot. Welcome to Mega Football. Let's get music started. The story begins in April 2005 in Salzburg. Red Bull GmbH, an Austrian energy drink company with a net worth in the music tens of billions, purchased SV Austria Salzburg, one of the most decorated clubs in the country's history. Titles, European football, more than a century of identity built on violet shirts, and a connection to the city that was understood as simply being part of what Salzburg was. Within weeks of the takeover, the violet was gone. Music, the crest was gone. The name became FC Red Bull Salzburg. The kit was red and music white. Red Bull's red and white. And the fans who cared most about what had just been lost did not protest and eventually accept it. They left. They formed their own club, SV Austria Salzburg, starting over in the lower divisions, carrying the history that felt like it had been taken from them. They are still there today, still playing, still in the violet. The following year, Red Bull moved into the United States, acquiring the Metro Stars, one of MLS's founding franchises, and renaming them the New York Red Bulls. Then, in 2009, came the most provocative move of all, the creation of Rasenballsport Leipzig in Germany. Music, not an acquisition, a creation. Red Bull bought the license of SSV Markranstädt, a 5th division club with no meaningful presence in German football, music, and rebuilt it from the ground up. The German Football Association's rules, music, were designed specifically to prevent what Red Bull was attempting. The 50+1 rule requires clubs to be majority owned by their own members, their supporters. So, Red Bull structured Leipzig as a registered association with membership fees so prohibitively high that the club launched with fewer than a dozen members. The voting majority belonged in practice to Music Red Bull. The backlash was immediate, sustained, and genuinely angry. Supporter groups across Germany organized boycotts. Away fans held banners calling Leipzig a non-club, a product, a stain on the history music of German football. Clubs refused to sell them away tickets. The fury was not simply about aesthetics, it was about precedent. Music. If Leipzig was allowed to exist and succeed, what did that say about the principle that football clubs belong to the communities they represent? By 2019, the network had expanded to South America with the takeover and rebranding of Clube Atlético, Music Bragantino, in Brazil, now known as Red Bull Bragantino, competing in the Serie A, and the Music CONMEBOL Sudamericana. The club nobody wanted had become an empire nobody could ignore. Strip away the controversy, and you are left with a question that is purely football. How does the Red Bull system actually function? What is the logic that connects a club in the Austrian Alps to one in Leipzig, to one in New Jersey, to one in São Paulo? The answer starts with a man most people outside the game have never music heard of, Ralf Rangnick. The German coach and sporting director who joined Red Bull in 2012 was the architect of the playing philosophy that now runs across every club in the network. Rangnick's football is built on pressing, specifically on winning the ball back as high up the pitch as possible, as quickly as possible, music, and attacking before the opposition can reorganize. It is vertical, physical, demanding, and extraordinarily consistent across every music Red Bull club. Watch Salzburg press, watch Leipzig transition. The movement patterns, the triggers, the distances between lines, they are the same, not similar, the same. Music. The pipeline does not run in one direction, and it does not start in one place. FC Liefering, Red Bull's direct feeder club in the Austrian second division, is where the youngest European music recruits enter the system. They learn the philosophy in competitive football before stepping up to Salzburg, but the network's reach goes further than Austria. New York has functioned music as a genuine development node. Tyler Adams came through the NYRB Academy, moved to Leipzig, and was eventually sold onward for a fee that validated the entire chain. Bragantino Music gives the system access to South American talent at prices the European market has not yet inflated. Players who can be developed within the Red Bull environment, music, before the network decides whether they belong at a higher level. Every club is both a destination and a waypoint. The system does not have one entry point or one exit, it has 6 of each, and they are all connected. The financial model that results from all of this is devastatingly efficient. Buy young at prices the market, music has not yet inflated, develop fast using a proven system, sell at a premium to clubs with the budget to pay it, then reinvest and music start again. The numbers across 20 years are extraordinary. Sadio Mané joined Salzburg for €4 million and left music for 11. Naby Keita left for 52 million. Erling Haaland arrived for 8 million and left for 64. Dominik Szoboszlai developed at Salzburg, music and Leipzig before Liverpool paid 70 million. Dayot Upamecano, Ibrahima Konate, Karim Adeyemi. Music, the list does not stop. No single club in world football has produced as much transfer value from players it developed internally at music, the prices Red Bull paid for them. That is not a coincidence. It is a competitive advantage that has been built, tested, refined, and protected over 2 decades. You can dispute the methods. You cannot dispute the table. Music, Red Bull Salzburg were champions of Austria in every single season between 2014 and 2023, 10 music consecutive titles. They have been regulars in the Champions League, and they have produced Champions League moments that go beyond results. The domestic dominance has since been broken. Sturm Graz have taken the last 2 Austrian titles, but for a club that Austrian football initially refused to take seriously, the decade they built stands as the blueprint. Music, everything else in the network was modeled on. Leipzig's rise is the most dramatic number. Music. In 2009, they were in the 5th division of German football. By 2016, they were in the Bundesliga. Music. And after 1 year, they were Champions League competitors. In 2020, they had reached the Champions League semifinals and finished the season as arguably the 4th best side in European football. They won the DFB Pokal in both 2022, music, and 2023. They are, by any objective measure, an established elite club. They got there in 14 years from the 5th tier. Red Bull Bragantino have pushed the boundaries of what the South, music American arm of the network can achieve, reaching the Copa Sudamericana final in 2021, music qualifying for the Copa Libertadores, and consistently competing at continental-level music in a country where football resources are concentrated at a handful of historic giants. Music, the New York Red Bulls reached the MLS Cup final in 2024, losing out on the title, but confirming their place among music, the competition's most consistent contenders. And in 2023, the network expanded again into Japan, with the acquisition of Omiya Ardija, a J2 League club based north of Tokyo in one of football's fastest-growing markets. 4 continents, 6 clubs, a coherent identity, connecting all of them. The project that German football tried to shut down before it started is now a permanent feature of the sport's music global landscape. And now the man overseeing all of it, with the authority to align the philosophy, raise the coaching standards, music, and articulate what this network is trying to become, is Jürgen Klopp. In January 2024, after 9 years at Liverpool, announced he was leaving Anfield. The assumption was a year off, a period of rest. What followed was, depending on your perspective, either perfect or baffling. Music. Klopp was appointed head of global soccer for Red Bull GmbH, not a club manager, the head of the network. The most charismatic music coach of his generation is running the most analytical project in football. The system just got a soul, and the clubs that hated Red Bull now face a more complicated version of that feeling. The results do not resolve the argument, and they were never going to, because the argument was never purely about results. The identity question sits, music, at the center of everything that football's traditional culture cannot forgive about Red Bull. When SV Austria Salzburg supporters walked away in 2005, they were making a statement about what a football club is. Not a product, not a vehicle for commercial returns, but a living institution that belongs music to a community across generations. The crest matters, the colors matter, the name matters. Not because of sentiment, though sentiment is real, music, but because those things are the mechanism by which a club retains its meaning to the people who give it its reason, music, to exist. Red Bull's answer to that argument has always been implicit. Look at what we built. Look at what these clubs are, music now achieving. Would Salzburg have been a Champions League club without the investment? Would Leipzig exist at all? The counter-argument is that achieving things is music not the same as meaning something, that a club created to serve a brand's marketing interests is a different kind of institution to one created to represent music, a city, regardless of how many trophies it wins. Modern football's audience invest not just in results, but in identity, in a sense of belonging to something with continuity and history. Red Bull's clubs, by design, do not offer that. They offer efficiency, quality, and a constant supply of exciting young players. That is a real offer. It is just not the same one. Here is the question that the hatred tends to obscure. Is Red Bull actually the villain of this story, or did they simply do first and most openly what everyone else is now doing quietly? The City Football Group now controls clubs in Manchester, New York, Melbourne, Yokohama, Montevideo, Palermo, Lommel, and beyond. Their network is larger than Red Bull's. Their budgets are larger. Their ambition is larger. And the Manchester City project has been the subject music of more financial fair play investigations than any other club in European football music history. Yet City Football Group does not attract the visceral cultural rejection that Red Bull does. Their clubs retain their names, their crests, music, their colors. The connection is financial, not philosophical. That distinction, in the eyes of traditional football culture, appears to matter enormously. Music. The multi-club model, connecting clubs across markets, sharing data, moving players between them, building commercial synergies, is no longer a Red Bull innovation. Music. It is the direction that elite football ownership has moved in almost universally. What Red Bull did was prove it works, not theoretically, in practice, on the pitch, in the transfer market, in the development of coaches who went on to reshape how the sport thinks about pressing music and tactical periodization. Every major ownership group, now building a multi-club portfolio, looked at what Red Bull produced and drew conclusions. The Paris FC investment, Red Bull's minority stake, music, in the French capital's second club, giving the network a presence in one of the sport's most commercially significant cities without a full rebrand, music suggests the model is evolving. The collaboration with Leeds United, a club with a passionate fan base, music deep history, and more Premier League ambitions points in the same direction. The network does not always need to own entirely. Sometimes access to the data infrastructure, the scouting methodology, the philosophical alignment, without music, the political cost of rebranding, is the smarter play. That evolution is, in a sense, Red Bull's quiet acknowledgement that the backlash, music, matters, not enough to change course. The results are too compelling for that, but enough to find new ways of expanding influence that do not require the direct confrontation that Salzburg and Leipzig provoked. So, here is where we land. 20 years after an Austrian energy drink company walked into a century-old football club in Salzburg and replaced the violet with red and white. Music. The sport has not resolved the question that moment raised. It has instead built an entire industry around attempting to answer it in the most commercially efficient way possible. The hatred is real, and it comes from a real place. When SV Austria Salzburg supporters chose the 4th division over rebrand, they were not being irrational. They were saying something true about what football is for and what gets lost when it is treated purely as a vehicle for commercial music returns. But the influence is equally real. The coaching philosophy that Rangnick built at Salzburg and Leipzig, now in the hands of Jürgen Klopp, who is applying it across 6 clubs and 4 music continents, has changed how the world's best teams press, transition, and think about the relationship between youth development and competitive music success. The question the briefing poses is the right one. In 20 years, will the Red Bull system be remembered as modern football's most hated idea or its most influential? The uncomfortable music truth is that it will probably be both, and that might be exactly what football deserves. This is the Red Bull Football Network. Subscribe to Mega Football, and we'll see you soon.